Our panel this afternoon discusses partnerships, and sustainable development is inherently an initiative so vast and expansive, no single organization, even country, can do it alone. So we raised the question, what kinds of partnerships do we need? How can we structure them to maximize benefit? And what golden rules can we follow, along with best practices, so that the partnerships that are created successfully in one municipality or in one ministry, in one part of the world, can be replicated with the right amount of tailoring to the needs and opportunities elsewhere. So we have a very diverse group of panelists joining us, and I'd like to welcome Abdul-Mohsin Al-Husseini, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for a satellite company called Analytical Space. I'd like to welcome again Dr. McKnight, the Chief Technology Officer of the government of Aruba, Varelie Croes, and Mr. Demetrius Lansuert, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, who is the head of channel partnerships at DataCamp. So please, once again, round of applause for our panelists. We're going to go from left to right here. So Abdul-Mohsin, I'd like you to begin by sharing a prompt 2-minute overview of what you're doing, what is Analytical Space about, and really what problem are you trying to solve?
So I went from 3 minutes to 2 minutes then. All right.
Keep talking, I'll make it 1 minute.
All right. So I am a technologist of the space nerd variety, as you mentioned. I started my career at NASA, but I also got a healthy exposure of policy. I went to the Kennedy School, which is where I went. But the reason I'm here is because I'm one of the co-founders of Analytical Space. It's a startup based in Boston. And what we're really trying to do is build a network of satellites in low Earth orbit to network other satellites that are taking images of the Earth. It sounds very obscure. Why should anyone care? Space is one of those misunderstood sectors. A lot of people think it's a waste of money. We should be focused on problems that we have here on Earth. And that's a fair question because a lot of people in my world think the answer to all these problems is becoming a multiplanetary species. I don't subscribe to that vision, but I will say this, that a lot of the problems that we're talking about, climate change, sustainable agriculture, food security, things like sustainable fishing, these are global problems. This is not something, like you said, you can fix with a very localized view. And in order to be able to think and act at a global scale, you really need to be able to see at a global scale. And that's what space can do for you. That's the promise of space. And that's what we're trying to do. We believe that you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're building these satellites to network. I mean, you saw Ken's presentation. He was showing you all these spatial and temporal gaps in data from places all over the world. And that's kind of what we're trying to fix here. You will be very surprised. People think of space as a very advanced industry. You'll be surprised if I tell you that a typical Earth observation satellite is only connected to the ground 3 hours a day. And the lag between data collection to delivery can be in the order of hours. So it's actually quite miserable. You wouldn't be comfortable, or you wouldn't accept that kind of connectivity for your iPhone, and you're just uploading your selfies to Instagram, right? And this is a $1,000 device, and satellites cost millions, tens of millions. In fact, some of the higher end ones cost billions of dollars. So that's where we come in. We're taking an approach that is enabled really by a couple of trends: Moore's law, computation, launch and drop and launch costs, thanks Elon Musk, and the opening up of space from government to commercial. What we'll be able to do, I think we've hit the 2 minutes, so I'll make this super quick. End vision for us, completely meshed network in low Earth orbit that gives you always on, near real-time view. So think, real-time planetary dashboard. You no longer have to rely on an astronaut looking down from the International Space Station to be able to see the world as one and whole. With this kind of capability, we can bring actionable, real insights and data that we can act on for the whole world. So I'll end it there.
Abdul-Mohsin, thank you so much. We're going to come back to a lot of the use cases regarding the work that you do, and I think what's fascinating is that you do have this policy background, you have a policy education. Meanwhile, you've also gained tremendous experience as an engineer, and now you're leading as an executive in a tech startup. I think the kinds of relationships that you've needed to foster to make it this far provide unique insight. And so not only in this panel, but I encourage everyone after the panel to engage with Abdul-Mohsin, and our panelists in order to really extract the most that we can get from them. So, Lee, I'd like to turn to you. You're known in the smart cities ecosystems, in the futurism worlds, and certainly pretty much anything with the word internet on it. A lot of folks have looked to your leadership. You're an academic, but also someone who is masterfully skillful in connecting the right people to make amazing things happen. It's because of you that this event today is live streamed by the Internet Society. Thank you again in the back. So I'd like to not just ask about the whole of your experience, but to target my question to the kinds of partnerships that are at the forefront of what you're trying to build right now, and what the intended outcome of such partnerships will be on the future of artificial intelligence and its ability to empower sustainable development.
Thanks. So again, giving a shout out to Jolie McPhee, he's been there as long as I have, or longer, in helping grow the internet in New York City and around the world. I said the phrase public-private partnerships. The internet knows it's really multi-stakeholder, or the multi-stakeholder model, meaning everybody, all groups, whether you're business, civil society, government, everybody has a contribution to make. The internet itself is held up, it's almost scary, it's held up by, how did this thing grow? It's because of people like Jolie that are dedicating time for decades. From civil society, governments on their own, if it was just governments, this thing would not exist, it would collapse. That's just the truth. So, and the governments know it. So having everybody at the table is required. So in the internet, for Liberia, if I'm going to grow the internet, what did I do first? You can go to liatag.org, Liberian Interagency Task Force and Advisory Group.org. Right now it's run by from Syracuse University because we're helping. So that means the government of Liberia can't make this happen. Microsoft on another panel was complaining that the government of Nigeria wouldn't talk to them for a year. Well, because Microsoft cares about what's good for Microsoft. So they're not going to do anything for them, just for them. But if Professor McKnight saying working with the Internet Society and working with private companies saying, and working with you, everybody works together, there's a way, because it's happened. We got the internet to half the world. So we're at another level. We can we can make it to a 100%. We can get there. We have to, and that will address if we do this with sustainability, connecting also to satellite and everything else. We can really advance reach all sustainable development goals. But if we don't keep the internet moving forward, none of this is going to happen without the connectivity, because all of the smart stuff, either in a cyber attack or in a storm or an earthquake, guess what? It's really stupid. It doesn't work. So you have to be able to maintain connectivity. So I've been building partnerships around recognizing that simple fact that, well, what you just said, so you made a mistake in your opening statement. The professor will correct you. You said one ministry. If it's one ministry, I won't work. I won't even talk to you, because when I started this stuff in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the most UN peacekeepers on the planet, where did the internet backpack go first? Right there. Because there were two ministries that were talking to me. And you say, okay, you know what? If there's a Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Education, then I'll talk to you. Because if it's just one, nothing's going to happen. And you need the partnership. If it's just any one minister, I don't have a decade to wait for you guys to start talking to another minister. I'm sorry. So if it's not a multi-stakeholder approach, I can't help. So I'll point back to Pamela on the Cybersecurity Privacy Advisory Committee that's trying to help 200 smart cities around the world. Not so much in developing countries yet, but that's where it's starting, and that's on the same multi-stakeholder model. It's the US government, there's 20 or 30 other governments involved, there's private companies, there's academics. If it's not multi-stakeholder, if it's just a couple private companies, if it's one ministry, I'm sorry, I don't have time for it because I know it's not going to work.
I think what's remarkable about that is public-private partnerships and partnerships for the global goals themselves are one of the global goals. Out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, number 17 is uniquely dedicated to partnerships that foster sustainable development. So we have goals that themselves are an end, such as the eradication of poverty. If we do that, it's a great milestone. We have other goals that are enablers for us to achieve the former. They're a means to an end. And creating partnerships, specifically centered on data, is at the forefront of what we expect from our not just our thinkers and our thought leaders and our private sector, but particularly from our public leadership as well. Ms. Varelie, I'd like to learn more about your leadership with the government of Aruba and what role you take. It's not every day that you hear of a chief technology officer of a country. So tell us what that really means. What is the unique role that you play, and how are you different from a Ministry of Information or something like that? I'd love to learn more about not just the work that you do, but again, the partnerships that would best augment the work that you're looking to achieve.
No, thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, not Technology Officer. So there's
I keep getting corrected today.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I'm the CIO, Chief Innovation Officer, and I'm a private sector person in the public sector. So it's been about a little over a year and a half that I took on this role as a challenge to help the country of Aruba innovate and develop an innovation strategy. So what my specific mandate is to design and develop an innovation strategy and help implement it. So what does that mean? That means that I work with multi-stakeholder platform on the national level to figure out, okay, what's the vision of the country and how do we use innovation to get there. And in Aruba, we take a innovation at the center of everything approach, so at the heart of policy. So not just innovation policy, but innovation in healthcare, innovation in education, innovation in agriculture. So really having it front and center to help our national strategy, or national economic policy, but also our very ambitious sustainable development plan. Aruba is very committed to the sustainable development goals. We're here today, actually the Minister of Education is here, our ambassador in DC is here as well. And so what we've done this week is share what we're doing, and so how do I do that? A couple of different ways. There's the policy side of things where I act as an advisor, me and my team, we act as an advisor to the government itself, which is the ministries, our government departments, as they're facing challenges and need advice on how to innovate, how to do things differently. So we act as your day-to-day advisor. But we also have set up an innovation lab, which is very unique and new for the region. An innovation lab is very common perhaps in big countries and big cities, but not as much in smaller communities where it's also needed, but because there's not enough capacity. You won't believe this, Aruba is a small country, but the level of bureaucracy is through the roof. And that's why we work with this innovation lab to help move fast and create partnerships across sector, across departments to be able to implement these plans. And we have a very, very ambitious agenda to achieve resilience, economic resilience, and we use the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda as our framework. And important to say here is that we can only achieve resilience if we have strong institutions. And to have strong institutions, we need an innovation agenda as a driver for that. And that's why it's important that, to work together in partnership, and we very much embrace the SDG 17, I think, and just partnership for the goals.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Varelie. Demetrius, I'd like to turn to you and to explore a little bit more about the way that DataCamp looks at partnerships. I've learned of some remarkable stories. Some of us who have been here through lunch have maybe seen notes about the DataCamp relationship with Singapore. Perhaps you can begin with that as an example, a case study, and how it could foreshadow other kinds of partnerships that DataCamp considers when trying to expand the number of people who are acquiring data science knowledge and education through your platform. Tell us a little bit about DataCamp and what kinds of partnerships are at the core of your expansion strategy.
Sure. So for those who don't know DataCamp is an online education platform, and the uniqueness of it is that it's actually fully exercise-based. So it's super application-based, and it's got different entry levels. So you can have people with zero knowledge on even mathematics, statistics, or definitely not data science, start and gradually gain confidence as they go through the exercises, and rapidly create a very, very strong level of data science. Over 300 courses, and the feedback that we get from the students is that it really demystifies the whole data science concept. And a lot of people are actually super surprised that they were able to go through the exercises and achieve that level of knowledge. And that's why we're now working together with countries that are feeling a big demand from their corporate world for skilled people that can, the more digital generation that's able to work with data. And our tool, our platform is used to pull people in, people who even had no clue they would ever be doing data science, and very rapidly, in a matter of even weeks, make them data literate. And that's where our partnerships are being formed. So we're forming partnerships with governments like AI Singapore, but also with the academic world, where we are used as a complementary tool next to the academic track. Because what we do is we ingest that hands-on learning by doing aspect and make it much more basically a business relevant capability. And then we also work with consulting firms like McKinsey, like Anderson. Basically what they do is they use our tool to go into their customer base, look at the projects that are coming into the company, look at the available resources, and then use our modules to upskill the existing workforce so that they don't have to disrupt the whole labor market and really fill that gap that there is in terms of knowledge for the new digital capability.
Phenomenal. So I want to open up the conversation a little bit among the panelists, and I like to change the format where rather than having long and really extensively thought out answers, I like this to be more of a rapid fire conversation. So I'm going to pose a question to the panel, and once someone chooses to respond, feel free to rebuke the person, to disagree, to add, and to add nuance to it. So what's the greatest bottleneck standing in the way of various stakeholders coming together, forming the right partnerships that allow public and or private initiatives or civil society-led initiatives to succeed and to thrive? Why doesn't more of it happen? 200 people or so came through these doors today because they were interested in learning more and engaging with other people on AI in the interest of sustainable development. We have folks down the block at UN headquarters that have been speaking about AI and about the SDGs all week. Why is it so difficult to build these meaningful partnerships? What's standing in the way? Feel free to take it as you like.
I'm happy to share from
Please.
our perspective in Aruba. So Aruba is a small island development state, and one of the I love this question, by the way. One of the big challenges that we have is capacity. Where we don't have, even if we have events like this, we probably don't have 200 people walking in. It's probably 5 to 10, and the same people keep coming to the same event. So we have a huge capacity issue, whereas it's not just the quantity but quality, right? We have a big brain drain situation, and the gap is getting bigger, and this is why partnerships are important, because if you look at all the issues that we're facing, just climate change, for example, globalization, small islands will be the hardest hits and the first to be hit. So that's why building resilience is important. It's the chicken and the egg, right? How do we get started? We want all of this, but we don't have the capacity ourselves, and this is why these partnerships are so important for us. So this is one of our really critical areas that we need to work on, is our own capacity as a country.
I'll add to that, I'm the entrepreneur, so I'm going to complain about funding and regulation, right? So, when we're trying to, these challenges are huge and new, and they need new approaches. New approaches need funding. So, if you know the $100 million check person, you can introduce me to them. But, regulatory aspects are a big one, right? Because, I'm putting satellites up there. They're pretty small satellites. There's going to be many of them. 10 years ago, that was unheard of. People would launch school bus-sized satellites, and there was very few. So on the government side, they're not, used to be able to review applications at the same speed, and it's actually very difficult for a cash-strapped startup that has, burn rates and things to worry about. So I do think government has a huge role to play here. Really not necessarily to pay for everything, but really just enable startups and new players to be more agile and just really streamline regulatory processes. So I think that's how I see even if the government doesn't pay for what I'm doing, they can really make my life a lot easier.
Okay, so as a professor, I'll have to disagree and say actually it's education that's a problem. But first I'll note I started, co-founded with the Jamaican Office of Utility Regulation, the Caribbean Internet Forum that helped bring broadband internet to the islands 15, 17 years ago. So part of the answer has to be, again, inter-Caribbean collaboration too. But okay, so back to the real problem, which is education. So I've said this before, there is no such thing as certified ethical AI developers. There just isn't. So there needs to be, and that needs to be thought through both from a technical, like how do you train somebody on the technology of artificial intelligence development? How do you understand the data science? How do you understand bias? How do you understand ethics? And that's not going to be solved one-time solution. That this is a big challenge. Until there is such a thing, then every time somebody says, oh, I've developed an ethical AI system, I say, and how do I know?
Well, I must say that the challenges that I see from the government space is the relationship with the enterprise, the commercial business. If you look at AI Singapore, why is AI Singapore so successful? It's because they have really created this fantastic platform where they pull in the resources from university, National University of Singapore, and also the corporate world. The corporate world launches projects, real valuable data science projects that they don't have the people for or can't find the skills for. And university has this platform for collaboration, partnership with us, where they create this upskill movement and then create a situation where those projects can be solved. And that is a very nice, solid, strong relationship that produces a very, very fast track of people who are from zero knowledge to suddenly being hired as a data scientist in the corporate world. So a very nice example of how government works together with companies, with partners like DataCamp to rapidly upskill people who would maybe not be really geared up for a really nice career and suddenly find themselves in the wonderful hot seat of data scientist career.
I agree. I think academia has a very important role in all of this, and especially in collaboration with government to build these platforms. Sorry. I was saying that academia has a very important role in this, and I agree that they have to be part of these multi-stakeholder platforms to solve these issues that we're having.
So I'd like to actually touch a little bit more on the Singapore relationship that you've built with DataCamp. I think it's a phenomenal example of how a government set an agenda for how they want to use AI, how they want to engage and accelerate what's been called the fourth industrial revolution. And they found a partner that specializes in educating masses of people through online MOOCs. What was right about the timing? What was right about the relationship? What aligned so that when Singapore AI connected with DataCamp, within a very short amount of time, millions of people, pretty much overnight, got access to data science education? And how can we create more of those opportunities?
Yeah, first of all, it's ease of access. So if you look at Singapore, what happens in Singapore is every Singaporean has this identity card. They log into the government portal, and immediately they get access to a DataCamp account. So they can go out the code, a unique code that they can use to access and create their account. So you have an enormous pull, because you make it so easy to just give everyone, regardless of background, the opportunity to try these exercises. And that's where you see a tremendous reconversion happening, where a lot of people who had no idea they would be doing this, suddenly becoming eligible for the actual business program, which I just hinted to. And then you have this very nice influx of people coming in from the citizenship, and then starting to work on projects and becoming super valuable and really making things happen in the commercial side and being hired. So it's really, I think, the access and the belief that basically anybody should have a chance to go through a process like that. And so far the results have been amazing, really amazing. Really heartwarming stories of people who have changed their lives just by going through that program and thought that they'd never be in such a position.
For what it's worth, I'm one of those people. So I wasn't born a techie, but I learned how to build machine learning algorithms. I learned Python when I was an adult, after graduating college and after my graduate experience. And it was because of the availability of online courses such as DataCamp. In fact, I'd say especially DataCamp, that just made my life easier. I think if it's true for me, it could be also true for a lot of other people. But I'd like to ask the entrepreneur, Abdul-Mohsin, you're the kind of person who's going to be hiring people for data science skills, and if you haven't already, you're going to be very soon. So what are you looking for when you're hiring people for their academic background, for the kinds of projects that they've done? Some of the feedback that we've gotten from attendees over the course of today is, this all sounds great. Like, I love AI. I want to see sustainable development become achieved more expediently. But what are some tangible steps that I can take? So somebody's looking at this conversation on meaningful partnerships in AI. Well, how can they partner as an individual and really just get the ball rolling? How can they join an AI company and contribute in a substantial way?
So it's my turn to correct you now.
Oh, great.
So what we're doing, where we sit, really, we're building the infrastructure for all this, right? So there are the content capture people, and then there's the AI analytics people, and we're just kind of the infrastructure. So we don't do analytics. Our name is very misleading. We're actually in the middle of a rebrand to deal with that.
So it's your fault, not mine.
So it is my fault. You know, we're always looking for very bright young students who just really have, like you said, like you wanted to learn it and you were able to learn it even though there was no formal educational program behind it. The way we hire, for a long time, interns outnumbered full-time people at our company. They wrote real software that went on like satellites that are in space right now. Because if people have the will to learn something and you are willing to trust them to do something, I think you can expect some very outstanding results. So I think it's really finding exceptional students who want to learn, right? And you can dedicate resources to help train them up.
Okay, so I want to actually maybe adjust the question a little bit. So it so happens that you hire people with maybe a little bit different of a background than a data science background per se, although the solutions that you create are substantially helpful for data science applications.
We're a little upstream,
right? Okay, so perhaps what we can ask is, maybe you can tell us a little bit, well, perhaps Professor Lee, maybe we can point this to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the data pipeline and what partnerships typically are created as data is itself created and as it's stored, as it's transmitted, and ultimately as it's analyzed and made into a predictor? Who are the kinds of stakeholders that we can keep an eye out for so that if one of us finds ourselves in a company, an organization that reflects one piece of this data pipeline, we know who to reach out to build more rooting in that pipeline?
I don't want to take the rest of the time, including shutting out Matthew's closing keynote by answering it. So I'll just note there's 17 critical infrastructures considered. So if you think about health, environment, water, sewage, transport, on every single vertical or sector would have its own distinct data pipeline, and then within that, that's just a gross generalization. Within each of those categories, whether it's bus, airports, and so on, there'd be another set of data pipelines. So essentially, wherever you work right now, you are on the data pipeline right now, and you could get upskilled and move into a data scientific position right now if you wished, or if you took the time. Or you could say, you know what, actually, the sector I'm in, I want to get out of here, but I would love to do data science somewhere along another chain. So all of those, we've said it enough, the big data is about the world now. So wherever you are in the world, there's a data pipelines, multiple data pipelines related to you, whether it's advertising, fashion, and so on. And you can somewhere you can learn to plug your skills in or develop the skills to take advantage and augment that, because every single sector, they're all digital data companies now, and they all need analytics. Or if you're actually in a company that doesn't realize it, then you should move to another one.
So one more question before we open it up to our audience. Part of the challenge that I've experienced in my fluidity between the data worlds and the policy worlds, or rather between tech and policy, is that we don't have enough people who speak both languages. In fact, the paradigms that people point to and the ways in which they construct their realities on an individual level are, of course, reflections of where they are and their environments, but it also is a reflection of the limitations of what they don't know. Oftentimes, we'll have people who are deeply knowledgeable about tech and the data that and the systems that contribute to a data ecosystem, and they may genuinely care a lot about one social cause or another which fits in the SDGs, but they have no full picture of how all of these SDGs are interconnected and cross-cutting. And the same can be said about folks who have a great understanding of sustainable development, may have a really multidisciplinary understanding within that space, but don't have the understanding of what are the bottlenecks within tech and what are the enablers for its success. So what advice can you share with our audience about how we can gain a multidisciplinary understanding within reason? No one's going to be a PhD in sustainable development and technology. Very few people are fluid in both. But how can we understand enough so that we can be the bridge between both worlds? This is for everybody on the panel.
Well, I'll just start off by saying that you're absolutely right. That's what I see talking to countries, that the government in charge of making plans for upskilling, they typically look at data science as a very remote, highly academic discipline, and make it look like it's too difficult, too challenging, and then just have an academic world try to figure it out. Where countries that are very successful, like Singapore, they kind of dumb down the whole data science topic and make it super accessible, super approachable by using a platform like data science, kind of demystifying the whole thing and bringing companies in. And then you see the practical nature of data science and how data science can answer a lot of questions and solve a lot of challenges. So the advice I would give is to very rapidly make sure you have that platform that brings companies and academics together so that you can work on real projects and everybody involved sees that data science isn't this very remote, high-in-the-sky, complicated thing, but a very practical, also pragmatic tool that you can use to solve some very pressing problems.
So again, obviously super successful programs that are making great progress, but there's many more, whether Code for Girls, all kinds of code camps, volunteer activities. So you absolutely agree that it's quite, this is far more accessible than just in the academy. Now, if you wanted to go in the academy, you could get a master's degree online in applied data science from Syracuse University or other universities. As an academic, it's impressive to see how quickly the academy shifted to saying everybody needs more data analytics too, whatever field you're in within the academy. And also now we're seeing, again, if you're a teen girl, you're living in an urban pocket of poverty, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can, and all of you in the audience, if you can learn the skills, you can do code camp, right? So it's important to recognize that this is a shift that just going back to what I said before, data is everywhere. Everybody needs some more upskilling. It's not just, and getting down to the next part about the artificial intelligence and analytics piece. Some people are going to be specializing in one area, some people are going to be in another area, some are going to be writing the algorithms, others are going to be interpreting the data, cleaning it, visualizing it, using your creative skills with it. So there's all kinds of different ways to plug in. There's not one set solution.
If I may add, from a public sector perspective, I think the mystifying is key. And one of our flagship programs right now is our e-government roadmap. We're looking to digitize our government within the next 5 to 10 years, looking at existing models out there. And what we are doing is we sit down and talk. I think Nelson Mandela said this one, people should just sit down and talk more. And we've been doing this a lot, and our roadmap has been a year in the making. It's because we've been doing a lot of these sit-downs and lunch and learns and talking with not just your traditional stakeholders, so not just within government, but we're bringing together heads of departments with entrepreneurs, with the creative people, with the experts in data, the non-experts, so bringing people together to help us envision where we want to be, to help them mystify the fear there is about sharing of data, about privacy, about AI. And this is what we're doing. We're doing a lot of these just very simple discussions and lunches and breakfasts. And this is not a traditional way of going about it, but it's working. So.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think really multidisciplinarity is key. And we're very lucky because space by necessity is a very multidisciplinary field. You have to have people from different disciplines working together, but all the different verticals are interested in space. So there are interesting partnerships you're trying to see now, like one company that does radar imaging. They can see through the dark and at night, and through clouds, and they're looking for ship traffic. And they work with another company that is looking for IAS logistics data. And if you overlay those, you can see who's switching off their AIS signals to do illegal fishing. Now the problem is, once they get the data, it's 4 hours later and they're gone, unless we can fix that. But you know, space is really one of those areas where you can really have multidisciplinary collaborations that can immediately have an impact on the SDGs.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. So before we wrap up, we'd like to open the floor to questions from the audience. And similar to earlier before, just to get as many as we can, we're going to have 3 questions asked at a time. And please be clear about who you're asking the question to, whether it's one or multiple panelists. And please keep the questions concise. So Dr. Sinan, please, your question.
Thanks, Ramy. My question is for the whole panel. And I think it's, you know, Mr. Al-Husseini, you mentioned that in space, the regulatory environment and the interplay between public and private, you know much more about it than I would, but I can tell you the pharma space, you said they were there to make your life easier. It's not what patients and consumers want to hear about the FDA, right, in terms of regulatory capture, even just being asleep at the wheel like we see with the Beijing public health use crisis. So my question for you, and then on the other hand with Mr. Langsberg, where it's very clear that like the incentives are really aligned between your company and the Singaporean government wanting to educate people. So at times when it's a little bit more oppositional or the incentives don't naturally align, if you could weigh in on how you managed to realign those incentives and get people not just in the same room, but on the same page.
All right, one more question.
Very general question. I know that UNESCO has a Creative Cities program, and I was just curious if there's any sort of intersection or overlap between smart cities and creative cities.
Okay, so any overlap between smart and creative cities? Okay. Do we have a third question? Yes, in the blue.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chloe. I work with Innovation First 20. One of the things that we're looking at doing in the UK is setting up an international centre for AI and climate change, which speaks to a last comment about how you bring people from very different communities together to understand how to work together and solve challenges. So the idea of the centre would be to have academics, the business community, and then the policy community, so that all of the pieces can kind of work together to roll out AI solutions to solve particular problems. And I just wanted to ask whether you've seen that kind of thing be implemented in other places, in other countries, where it's a centre where all of those people from different communities are working under one roof together. And I guess whether you think it would work, it's a good idea. So the UK government's considering it happens.
Excellent, excellent. So to summarize, our first question was, how do you align misaligned interests between governments, especially regulatory bodies, and companies that have a service to offer? The second one was, what's the similarity or overlap between smart city and a creative city in the UN ecosystem? And number 3, have you seen ecosystems that truly bring together these multi-stakeholder coalitions under one umbrella and be successful in doing that? And what examples can you share from that regard? So panels, the questions are open to everybody.
Well, I'll just start off with actually combining both questions here. So what I've seen, I've been dealing with countries, smaller countries, more developing countries. I've developed also programs with more Western countries. What I see is that as you have more stakeholders that are running that kind of a program with upskilling and bringing in data science, AI skills with the population, the key to success is to bring in someone from industry that has a very focused, like almost like a KPI, like a metric of success. And that metric of success is typically how many people are actually being upskilled in the program. And then make sure that you have a very reasonable time for that to happen. And having someone from industry come in with industry relations ensures that very close collaboration between the academic world and the corporate world. So typically, companies will be working within a platform of the university or some kind of an academic institution, and therefore create this very common environment where you upskill people and solve real data problems for real companies in a very short period of time. And then from the government side, what they love is the reporting. And the reporting then shows them how many people went through the program, how much time did they go through the program, how many of them successfully completed those modules, those exercises. So that's the reporting that DataCamp gives to the countries so that the government can really be proud of what they accomplished. Okay, we paid X amount of money for the whole program. How many of our citizens got access? how many actually went through the modules, how many came into the corporate space of doing actual projects, and how many got a job. And then you see that you can achieve dramatic results in a matter of 2 to 3 months, which is very, very quick, very fast for a government program.
All right, thank you. Who else?
So so basically, again, I don't go anywhere where I'm not invited, but if I'm invited by the head of state or a minister, to offer pro bono advice, then I will. So essentially, if there's not political leadership, the question, going to the question about misaligned things, if somebody does not want to be aligned and they're in leadership, I don't have time for that place. I'm sorry. There's a lot of problems. I can't solve that one. But if there is political leadership, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf saying, Library and Telecommunications Authority, you will get a letter from Professor McKnight. You say, okay, I'll write a letter. And now you want a letter to the Ministry of Posts and Telecoms. Now, okay, there's sort of dialogue back and forth. Okay, now a letter to the Ministry of Education, now a letter to the Ministry of Health. And so I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of how Liberia runs. Like Yusuf knows people that advise the president like full time, so they know better than me. But if there's a dialogue and there's that signal from the leadership, then we were able to provide that kind of advice across from one presidential administration to the next with a plan and a framework where everybody, including the private sector, including the citizens, including the diaspora, the international community, everybody would be on board. Now going back to the creative community, creative city, there's something else. We haven't said the word intelligent city, so this shows again my gray hair. So because before we called this stuff smart cities, it was called intelligent cities. You can still get a prize for being an intelligent city. I'm not sure what the difference is, to be fair to Matthew, between an intelligent city and a smart city. It is, maybe there's a branding or logo. So UNESCO, but has the right emphasis on thinking about creativity as part of those activities. I guess I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I don't think we can have a smart city without a creative city. I believe they're intertwined and very much feed off each other. So I see them as one. To add to what both of you were saying, I fully agree. I think to create these platforms that actually work, strong leadership is extremely important. Strong leadership, and you both touched on this, transparency. Sharing what the purpose is, sharing what the results are, but also sharing the mistakes and what's not working, being constantly being transparent and being consistent with the information. And the third thing was continuity, right? What happens, especially in government, when government changes. When there's a change of leadership, there's usually also a change in policy priorities. So how do you institutionalize these mechanisms or these models to make sure they can continue and be sustainable for the long term? Because otherwise, you can have a situation where people who have invested a lot of their own time in these platforms, that they lose faith in the system, or they don't want to do it again the next time around. So these institutional mechanisms are very important to have them very well anchored, and I think strong leadership and transparency does help with that.
Yeah, I'll just add, it's a great question. I mean, we as a company, our mission is to make the world a better place, so obviously we want to be good, responsible actors. But if you buy into the narrative of the fourth industrial revolution, one of the defining features of an industrial revolution is transformative change. And I think one of the roles that regulators have to take on is kind of being attuned to some of the market trends in terms of their processes and resources. So I'll use one example, finite number of civil servants looking at certain applications. Suddenly, instead of having one satellite a year, 5 satellites a year, you have 100, 200, it's much smaller. We're the same. That creates bottlenecks, right? So these are the kinds of process changes that we see, and there is an entire industry association that we belong to that is part of that conversation, and things are changing in a positive direction there. But even at the international level, this is I have to tread lightly because I have to be. They have to like me if I want to stay in business. But if you want to change, just in terms of spectrum, if you want to change at the ITU level certain regulations, it's very time consuming. I think it take up to 8 years. Now in startup time, that's we'll be long dead before anything happens. So it's important to have regulatory certainty and completely understand these rules, but I think that, thinking innovative partnerships, right? We don't want to like do away with the system and anarchy everywhere. That's not what we want. But sort of constructive, collaborative conversations where we can reach a better process that can achieves outcomes for new actors and existing players as well.
All right, thank you guys for being a part of the Innovative Partnerships panel. I'd like everybody to join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists.